There is a village in the mountains of Nagano Prefecture where the last child was born 17 years ago. The elementary school closed in 2009. The post office followed in 2014. The last doctor retired in 2018 and was never replaced. The convenience store, the final one, 40 minutes drive away, shut its doors 2 years ago. Of the 340 people who once lived there, 61 remain. Their average age is 74. They are not unusual. Across Japan, there are thousands of villages just like this, and hundreds that have already gone further. Villages where the last resident has died or moved away, where the houses stand empty, roofs collapsing slowly under the weight of snow and time, where the rice paddies have been reclaimed by bamboo and forest, where the only visitors are researchers, journalists, and the occasional urban Japanese person who comes to photograph the ruins of a world that existed within living memory. Japan calls these places Genkai Shuraku, marginal communities. Communities that have passed the point of self-sustaining, where the population has fallen so far and aged so severely that recovery is no longer realistically possible. There are currently over 15,000 of them in Japan, and the number grows every year. This is one of the most profound demographic stories unfolding any year in the world right now, and almost nobody outside Japan is paying attention to it.
To understand what is happening to rural Japan, you need to understand Japan's demographic situation in full, because it is unlike almost anything the modern world has seen. Japan's population peaked in 2008 at approximately 128 million people. It has been declining ever since. By 2024, it had fallen to around 124 million. By 2050, current projections suggest it will drop to somewhere between 95 and 100 million. By 2100, some models project fewer than 60 million, less than half the peak. These numbers are extraordinary. Japan is not experiencing a temporary dip. It is experiencing a sustained, structural demographic contraction that has no clear floor. The birth rate tells the story plainly. Japan's total fertility rate, the average number of children a woman is expected to have in her lifetime, sits at approximately 1.2, one of the lowest ever recorded for a major nation in peacetime. The replacement rate, the number needed to maintain a stable population, is 2.1. Japan has been below replacement since the 1970s. The gap has been widening for decades. At the same time, Japan has the oldest population of any large country on Earth. Over 29% of Japanese people are aged 65 or older. The median age is 49. In some rural prefectures, the median age is approaching 60. The combination of very low birth rates and very high longevity creates a population structure that demographers describe as inverted, a large elderly cohort at the top and a shrinking younger generation at the base. As the elderly generation passes and is not replaced by sufficient numbers of younger people, the total population falls. And in rural areas, where young people have been leaving for decades, the process is happening faster and more severely than anywhere else.
Rural Japan is not simply declining because people are having fewer children. It is declining because for the past 70 years, young Japanese people have been leaving the countryside for the cities and not coming back. The story begins after World War II, when Japan embarked on one of the most rapid industrializations in history. Factories needed workers, cities needed population. The government actively encouraged migration from rural areas to urban centers, particularly to the great metropolitan regions of Tokyo, Osaka, and Nagoya. Young people responded. Through the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, millions of rural Japanese men and women, many of them the children and grandchildren of farmers who had worked the same land for generations, boarded trains to the city. They found work in factories, in offices, in the service industry. They built lives in urban apartments. They married, had children, and put down roots in a world that had nothing to do with the rice paddies and fishing villages they had grown up in. The cities offered something the countryside could not: opportunity, better wages, better schools, better hospitals, better transport, better entertainment, better prospects for the next generation. And once a family made the move, once the children grew up as city people with city friends and city careers and city partners, the connection to the home village loosened. Visits became occasional, then rare, then the grandparents died, and there was no one left to go back to. The family home, a wooden farmhouse that might have stood for 100 years, sat empty. Then it fell apart. This pattern, multiplied across millions of families over 7 decades, is what has produced the current crisis. Rural Japan did not suddenly become unlivable. It became unreachable, not geographically, but economically, socially, and psychologically, for the generations who might otherwise have sustained it.
One of the most visible symptoms of rural Japan's decline is a phenomenon with a specific Japanese name: akiya, empty houses. Japan currently has approximately 9 million vacant homes, a number that represents roughly 14% of the country's total housing stock. Many of these are in rural areas, abandoned by families who move to cities and cannot sell them because there are no buyers. Others are in small towns, where the population has declined to the point that demand for housing has essentially vanished. The akiya crisis creates a deeply strange visual experience in many parts of rural Japan. Streets of intact, once loved homes, with gardens that were tended, with entranceways that were swept, with rooms that held families for generations, standing silent and deteriorating. Roof tiles displaced by weather, wooden walls darkening with damp, and gawa verandas rotting at the edges, gardens returning to wildness. Some of these homes are being offered for sale at prices so low they seem impossible. 100,000 yen, 50,000 yen, sometimes free, with the owner simply wanting someone to take responsibility for a property that has become a liability. A small but growing number of people, mostly young urban Japanese and some foreigners, are taking advantage of these prices. The government has even created official akiya banks, databases of available empty homes, to try to match abandoned properties with potential buyers or renters willing to move to depopulated areas. The results are mixed. Some villages have been successfully revitalized by small waves of new residents: artists, remote workers, people seeking a slower life. Others have received buyers who renovate with enthusiasm, then find the isolation and the lack of services unsustainable and leave. The fundamental problem is not the houses, it is the infrastructure around them: the schools, the hospitals, the shops, the transport that makes a place livable. And that infrastructure cannot be rebuilt for a handful of newcomers.
Behind the statistics and the empty houses, there are people. And perhaps the most quietly devastating aspect of rural Japan's disappearance is what is being lost with the generation currently living through it. Japan's rural population includes some of the last practitioners of agricultural traditions that stretch back centuries. Rice farming methods passed down through families for 15 or 20 generations. Knowledge of which wild plants grow along which mountain path in which season. The technique for building a traditional thatched roof. The timing of festivals tied to agricultural cycles that predate recorded history. This knowledge is not written down in most cases. It was never needed to be. It was transmitted directly, person to person, generation to generation, through watching and doing and being corrected and trying again. When the last person who knows something dies without having taught it, it is simply gone. Not stored somewhere, not recoverable, gone. Japanese folklorists and anthropologists have been in a race against time for decades.
documenting what they can before the people who know it are no longer here. There are recording projects, archive initiatives, oral history programs, efforts to capture at least the ghost of knowledge that cannot truly be preserved outside of living practice. But even the most thorough archive cannot replace the thing itself. A video of an 80-year-old farmer demonstrating how to read the sky before a harvest is not the same as growing up in a family where that skill was normal, necessary, and transmitted without ceremony as part of daily life. What is disappearing in rural Japan is not just population. It is a way of being in the world, a relationship with land, with seasons, with community, with time that took centuries to develop and is dissolving in a single generation.
The Japanese government has been aware of this crisis for decades. The responses have been varied, creative, sometimes effective, and never quite sufficient. Furusato Noze, hometown tax, allows urban residents to make tax contributions to rural municipalities in exchange for local products. Rice, seafood, fruit, craft goods. It has pumped billions of yen into rural economies and raised awareness of regional products. But it does not bring people back to live there. Regional revitalization programs, championed especially by former Prime Minister Abe under the banner of creating dynamic local communities, invested heavily in infrastructure, tourism development, and incentives for companies to relocate operations outside the major cities. Some areas saw genuine benefit. Others received investment that built facilities with no one to use them. The COVID-19 pandemic created an unexpected opening. Remote work became normalized across Japan almost overnight. For a brief window, young urban Japanese people, suddenly freed from the obligation to be physically present in Tokyo offices, moved to rural areas in meaningful numbers. Municipalities that had been shrinking for decades saw population upticks. Some of those people stayed. But the drift back to cities has largely resumed as office attendance expectations returned. The fundamental asymmetry, cities offer more, has not been resolved by remote work technology alone. Perhaps the most honest assessment is this: some rural communities in Japan will survive and even thrive through a combination of good fortune, innovative local leadership, and the selective appeal they hold for people seeking alternatives to urban life. Others, the most isolated, the most aged, the most depleted of basic services, will not. They will complete their arc quietly, their last residents cared for as they age, their houses standing empty afterward, until they return to the earth. This is not a failure of policy, exactly. It is the end of something that began long ago. An agricultural civilization built across Japan's mountains and valleys over 2,000 years, facing forces of urbanization and demographic change that no government program has yet found a way to fully reverse. There is a word in Japanese for the feeling this story produces, or at least a word that comes close. Mono no aware, the bittersweet awareness of impermanence, the particular sadness of beautiful things that are passing. Rural Japan is passing. Not quickly, not dramatically, not with the sharp shock of a disaster or a war, but slowly, quietly, one empty house at a time, one unfilled school desk at a time, one festival that happens for the last time without anyone quite registering that it is the last time. The 61 people remaining in that Nagano village know what is happening. They have watched it happen for decades. They did not choose it. They simply stayed. Because this is home. Because someone has to tend the graves. Because leaving would mean admitting that the thing they spent their lives being part of is over. There is extraordinary dignity in that staying, and extraordinary sadness in what it means.
If you ever have the chance to visit rural Japan, not the famous ryokan in Hakone, not the deer park in Nara, but the real countryside, the mountain villages and the coastal hamlets, and the rice farming communities of the interior, go. Go while the festivals still happen. Go while there are still people who remember what it was. Go while the farmhouses still have smoke rising from their chimneys, and the rice paddies are still tended, and the old women still bow as you pass on the road. Go. And pay attention. Because the Japan that most people never see, the Japan that was here long before the bullet trains and the vending machines and the neon, is still there. But it is not waiting.